That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, we're going to try something a little bit different for the video today. I'm going to go through, and instead of giving y'all a 5 must-start running back video and a 5 must-bench running back video, I'm just going to talk about every matchup. We're just going to go through and we're going to talk about every matchup, every running back, whether I like the opportunity they should have in the game, whether I like the game flow they should be in, and whether I think you should be starting them or benching them. But of course, you know what we have to do real quick. I have to go to our newest YouTube video. I have to grab a couple of random comments to give away Fantasy Flock Network hats with. With these Fantasy Flock Network hats, we are giving away multiple every single day until the end of the season for people who are subscribed to the channel. Drop a like on the video and make sure you go through and leave that comment at the same time. Okay, so now first winner coming up from Oliver says, yes, sir, I have Trey Lance on my bench. Would you start him over Josh Allen this week, though? They're both going to have crazy games. I need that hat, please. Okay, my friend, you got that hat, and I'll say, no, there's no way you can start Trey Lance over Josh Allen. Y'all know I am the biggest Trey Lance stan in the world, but you can't go start him over Josh Allen. That would be ridiculous. Eat My Payday coming out says, I value Patterson higher than any offer I've gotten, so I'm just going to keep him till the bye weeks. Okay, well, my friend, don't really care what you think about Patterson. You just won yourself a Fantasy Flock Network hat. Send me that email ASAP with your physical address so I can send that out to you. And yeah, before we get into it, I also have to address our sponsor of the video, which is Underdog Fantasy. I've said this time and time again. I don't think y'all understand the impact that this makes, though. I mean, make sure you go make a $10 deposit on Underdog Fantasy. Check out the drafts that they have. Check out the player props that they have. Nothing, and I repeat, nothing supports this channel more than you going through the link in the description or the comment section using promo code FLOCK, making that $10 deposit. You get a max deposit bonus. You also get daily additional entries to win a Fantasy Flock Network hat when you use promo code FLOCK. My birthday's on Sunday. There's nothing that supports this channel more than y'all going through and using promo code FLOCK on Underdog. Please, please, please make sure you do so. And yeah, let's go through and let's talk about these games. The first one we're going to talk about is happening today, so we can kind of put our statement out here. That way y'all can make fun of me on Friday and Saturday when we get it hilariously wrong. But let's go through and talk about the Los Angeles Rams going to Seattle to play the Seattle Seahawks here. And with the Rams, it's simple. I mean, you start Darrell Henderson. Henderson played almost every single snap this past week against the Arizona Cardinals, working his way back from that injury. He was not eased in the slightest. I mean, we've said this in so many live streams up until this point. Darrell Henderson, not someone I was drafting that aggressively this offseason, but I mean, we have to admit that all of a sudden he is the lead running back. I don't necessarily think Sony Michel is going to be taking touches away in this game. He's the lead running back in what should be one of the most productive offenses in the NFL. I mean, with Seattle here, I know that they built up a reputation for a very long time to have some great defense. That's not the case anymore. I think everybody kind of knows this by now. But if you're looking at Seattle, they've led up 33 points to the Tennessee Titans. They led up 30 points to the Minnesota Vikings so far this season. Not necessarily viewing this as a matchup where we have to be that concerned. I mean, you should have Darrell Henderson being able to easily get used. I mean, just especially at the end of the game here, if you're just assuming that the Los Angeles Rams will be leading in the fourth quarter, which I think we should assume that they will be. I think the spread on this game currently is actually 3 points. I think I would take probably the Los Angeles Rams -2.5, -3 points, depending on where you can find that line. I think the Rams are going to crush here. And now with Seattle, it's a little bit different because with Chris Carson, obviously there's some injuries where we don't necessarily have a full understanding of what impact they will play in this game. Now, Thomas, please, please, please. I know it's a lot of work, but if you can, go through and grab the player props that we are looking at on Underdog Fantasy and include them with what we are going to have with each running back we're discussing here. Because if I'm pulling this up right now, the player prop that you actually have for Chris Carson this week is only 52.5 rushing yards. So that's the number you can go bet on Underdog Fantasy, whether you think it's going to be over or under. And here, I think that knowing how low this number is and the limited usage that Chris Carson will have in the receiving game at the same time, he is essentially just a touchdown or bust player at this point. I think Chris Carson, especially with Alex Collins and the usage that he had this past week, is probably going to be a player that I'm going to be looking to bench personally. Now, of course, you may be in a spot where you lost David Montgomery, you lost Christian McCaffrey, and you're in a position where you really don't have another option outside of Chris Carson. And yeah, go through and start him. I just think that he's going to have to walk away with multiple touchdowns if he's going to finish as the top 10 running back this week. I don't think the volume's going to be there. The game flow is going to be there either for him to come out here and crush. I mean, the Rams, despite the Arizona Cardinals having a fantastic day this past week, they still have a really good defense. Now, our next matchup will be the New York Jets playing the Atlanta Falcons here. And with the Falcons, I mean, you're starting Cordarrelle Patterson. With Patterson, we actually have him ranked as the running back 17, I believe, this week. Now, we have him ranked as a low-end running back 2 for the rest of the season. A big thing I want to be monitoring with this Atlanta Falcons situation, however, and I know a lot of people think we are crazy when we say this. I know not really anybody else is viewing it this way, but I think Russell Gage, playing or not for the Atlanta Falcons, does make an impact on the usage that you're going to get from Cordarrelle Patterson, specifically in the receiving game, knowing that Cordarrelle Patterson, he's a former wide receiver. You're not viewing him as a prototypical running back here. And with no Russell Gage, they're just so limited on the depth that they have at that position after trading away Julio Jones that I think that's an explanation on why you can see Cordarrelle Patterson getting targeted at such a high rate when he is running those routes out of the backfield. Now, keep in mind, this is a running back that's only played, I think he played like 23 snaps this past week. He's not really playing many snaps whatsoever. The problem is the matchup against the New York Jets should be one that the Atlanta Falcons are easily able to go through and put up a considerable amount of points. Now, keep in mind, this game is in London. In these London games, it's so hard to know exactly what to expect. That's why Vegas right now has this game. I believe it was only a 3-point spread when we pulled this up. So you would naturally assume that the Atlanta Falcons were favored a little bit more than that. But keep in mind, with these London games, it's almost impossible to know what we're going to get here. So I think we're going to start Cordarrelle Patterson. Mike Davis is an option that y'all know I hated Mike Davis in drafts this year. We called him one of the most overdrafted running backs in literally, I mean, if I pull up Underdog Fantasy, we did hundreds of real money drafts on Underdog Fantasy this offseason. And if I'm looking at the exposure that we have for Mike Davis, I have him nowhere. We drafted Mike Davis in less than 3% of leagues. I mean, that's laughable. But at the end of the day, you should have this as a defense that the Atlanta Falcons can easily put up points against. You should have this as a game where the Atlanta Falcons are most likely leading in the second half. At the same time, I think here with Mike Davis, this is a running back that did see the majority of snaps this past week. So you could make an argument to go through and start him. I'm probably going to avoid it. And you can't start anybody on the New York Jets. I mean, I know that Michael Carter looks like he is the lead running back there now, but you just can't go through and start anybody there. And now our next game will be the New England Patriots and the Houston Texans. We're going to keep it brief with Houston, very similar to what we said with the New York Jets. I mean, we identified Davis Mills before he ever took a snap in the NFL as the worst starting quarterback in the NFL this season. Going up against the New England Patriots, this Houston Texans offense should have a very hard time moving the ball down the field. You can't start anybody when it's a massive committee in Houston right now. Now, on the opposite side of this, with the New England Patriots, going back to running backs that I thought were severely overrated coming into the year. I mean, with Damien Harris, we drafted him in about 6% of our leagues this season. So we were underweight on Damien Harris, a running back that I was consistently telling y'all to avoid in PPR formats, knowing that he did not have the usage in the receiving game. So he was going to be a touchdown or bust level player. Not a player that I really like for the entire season, but for this week in particular, I actually think that Damien Harris is very appealing against the Houston Texans, as this is a defense that we know is going to allow a considerable amount of production. This is a game where it's going to be the exact opposite of what the New England Patriots had playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this past week, where they're not going to have to throw the ball consistently. They are going to be able to just find success and running the ball with volume and then working off that play action with Mac Jones himself. So I think that Damien Harris, you can get away starting Damien Harris this week just because the matchup is so damn good. Now, our next game, you're going to have the Detroit Lions, Minnesota Vikings. Not too much to say. You start DeAndre Swift. I know DeAndre Swift was not that great this past week in what was a matchup that we identified as being a pretty difficult matchup for DeAndre Swift. However, this week in particular, you're looking at Swift saying, well, he is going up against the Minnesota Vikings. This is a defense that you don't have to be too concerned about. And DeAndre Swift is currently like second in the NFL in both targets and receptions at the running back position. He's just running so many routes as this Detroit Lions offense has really no wide receivers to get to. And then on the case of the Minnesota Vikings, I know we were wrong this past week. I mean, maybe I was just overestimating the assumption that we are going to have Dalvin Cook coming back and being 100% healthy right away. But yeah, they did use Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison in a committee this past week when Dalvin Cook was coming back from that injury. But I'd imagine now that Dalvin Cook's a lot closer to 100%. Dalvin Cook is just that workhorse level running back. The Minnesota Vikings should be leading pretty much throughout this entire game. So yeah, Dalvin Cook, you're starting. You're benching Alexander Mattison. Also benching Jamal Williams. I know Jamal Williams saw the majority of the carries this past week for Detroit, but DeAndre Swift's getting high value touches here, even if Jamal Williams is getting more touches overall. Now, our next game will be the Philadelphia Eagles playing the Carolina Panthers, and I'm not going to lie, I'm not interested in really any running back in this matchup as you're looking at Carolina, and we identified CHUBA Hubbard as a running back this past week. I mean, so many people over there on Underdog Fantasy made money taking the under on CHUBA Hubbard 3.5 receptions. I am so proud of that call. You have no idea. I was just staring at the Carolina Panthers Dallas game all week this past week, just praying that we were going to hit that under so we could cash in. Really, we made like $1,000 on Underdog this past week. It was great. But anyway, I mean, here with CHUBA Hubbard, this is a spot where clearly he was playing in a committee this past week. I think that here against the Philadelphia Eagles, it is a spot where the Carolina Panthers should be leading the majority of the game. Still, I mean, he's a committee running back. He's not getting a ton of usage in the receiving game. He had 2 targets out of the backfield this past week in a game where the Carolina Panthers trailed the majority of the time. So it's hard to just go through and jam in CHUBA Hubbard. And Miles Sanders is a running back that we have been nonstop talking about this. I know you are annoyed with me saying this right now. I have Miles Sanders on a lot of my own teams. Like if I go over to those Underdog Fantasy drafts we did, I had Miles Sanders as one of my most drafted running backs when he was going in the 5th round. I thought it was a value, and apparently it wasn't. Because here, Miles Sanders losing that passing down situation to Kenneth Gainwell. And at the same time, this Carolina Panthers run defense is a very good run defense, despite what the Dallas Cowboys were able to do this past week. And also with Miles Sanders, he's playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers next Thursday. So there are a multitude of reasons on why we should be looking to sell low on Miles Sanders right now before his value continues to plummet. And you can't start Miles Sanders this week. I don't even know if we have him ranked as a top 24 running back. Now, our next game is going to be the New Orleans Saints playing the Washington football team. Yeah, we're going to be starting Alvin Kamara. With Alvin Kamara, yes, Taysom Hill gets the red zone usage this past week, which definitely limits the overall upside that you had from Alvin Kamara as a running back that you're kind of betting that he's going to have a high touchdown rate on a per touch basis based on what we have seen over the past few years and when he has hit that elite mark in fantasy. Taysom Hill stealing that, as well as Alvin Kamara getting no targets out of the backfield, definitely makes you want to lower your expectations for Alvin Kamara. I was someone making fun of everybody drafting Derrick Henry over Alvin Kamara coming into this season. Yeah, it looks like I was horribly wrong on that one, but still, I think that Alvin Kamara is a must-start running back still at this point. You have the injury to Tony Jones at the same time. Now, with Antonio Gibson, this is a running back. You have to lower your expectations. J.D. McKissic still has maintained that role as the 3rd down running back here for Washington. Now, with that being said, this situation isn't as bad as what it may look for this week in particular, considering the fact that you actually have this spread under 3 points for this game where it should be a close game. So I think you could see the Washington football team decide to lean a little bit more on Antonio Gibson in a neutral game flow. Now, our next matchup is going to be the Tennessee Titans and the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, you were going through and you were jamming in both running backs. Both running backs here are must-start guys. Obviously, Derrick Henry is the running back 1, and it's not even close this week in a game where we don't really know the health of either Julio Jones or A.J. Brown going into it. They're 100% going to have to lean on Derrick Henry, and we know Derrick Henry historically has just crushed the Jacksonville Jaguars. And with James Robinson here on the other side, I really want to be monitoring the Carlos Hyde injury, because if Carlos Hyde is coming back and playing in this week, then you should expect that 30 to 40% of those carries for James Robinson are going to be siphoned away for Carlos Hyde. But still, Robinson in a plus matchup against the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans have one of the worst defenses in the NFL this season. At the same time, Robinson has the exclusive passing down role for the Jacksonville Jaguars, where it doesn't matter if Carlos Hyde is going to be active or not. You're going to go through and start James Robinson. Now, our next matchup will be the Miami Dolphins and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And y'all know the guy that we hated, just like Mike Davis, Myles Gaskin, literally getting benched this past week for Malcolm Brown. Malcolm Brown crushed Myles Gaskin with the amount of snaps that he played. Myles Gaskin at this point is a backup running back. A backup running back. You cannot consider doing anything with Myles Gaskin in your starting lineup, especially in a matchup where the Miami Dolphins running back core is going up against the toughest run defense in the entire NFL. I mean, you're fading the Dolphins as much as you can here. And with Tampa, I think it really comes down to, is Giovanni Bernard active? Because if Gio is inactive, we just saw Leonard Fournette in that game flow get almost every single touch out of this backfield for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers against the New England Patriots. Obviously, it would be a great matchup as well against the Miami Dolphins here. So I think you would go through and honestly would start Leonard Fournette against the Miami Dolphins. Even though I'm not a massive fan of Leonard Fournette. Now, our next game is going to be the Green Bay Packers and the Cincinnati Bengals. So with the Packers, you start Aaron Jones. A.J. Dillon did get a considerable amount of work this past week, but the majority of those touches for A.J. Dillon did come in the fourth quarter, so you don't want to be reading too much into that. Joe Mixon, we're just going to have to sit here. We're going to have to monitor it. I don't think we can start Samaje Perine if Joe Mixon misses, just because with Samaje Perine, the matchup isn't good enough where if he was going up against a team like the Miami Dolphins, then we could say, okay, well, yeah, he's going to be the feature down running back for the Bengals. Should be a game where they're going up against a soft run defense, and the Bengals are going to be leading the majority of the time, so they are going to be running the ball. There you could start a handcuff level running back like Samaje Perine, but no, against the Green Bay Packers, the Packers are going to be leading this game. I think the Bengals are going to be forced to throw the ball more than they have been over the past few weeks. So I think you don't start Samaje Perine if he's the starter for Cincinnati, but if Joe Mixon is the starter, you can go through, start Joe Mixon. Just lower your expectations. Now, our next game is going to be one of the lowest scoring games of the week between the Denver Broncos and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, with Najee Harris, you're starting Harris every single week, as this is a running back that literally is leading the NFL. Now, I know it's a small sample. I know it's only 3 or 4 weeks, but he is leading the NFL in both targets and receptions out of the backfield. I mean, I would have never guessed that that was going to be the role Najee Harris was playing in. Now, keep in mind, over the past few weeks, you've seen a couple of these wide receivers for the Pittsburgh Steelers missing time. That definitely has made Ben Roethlisberger lean up a little bit more on what you're getting from Harris out of the backfield. Still, I mean, there's no reason to go through and bench him for this week. And now on the Denver side of things, yeah, we're going to have to go through, continue to bench Javonte Williams, continue to bench Melvin Gordon. I mean, against this Pittsburgh Steelers defense, especially when you have Drew Lock as your starting quarterback, I'd imagine that the Denver Broncos have a very hard time moving the ball down the field. And if they're going to be playing in a pure committee, splitting these touches 50-50, there's no reason to go through and start either one of those players. Now, our next matchup here will be the Chicago Bears playing the Las Vegas Raiders. And honestly, this is one of the tougher matchups of the week to go through and try to determine, are we starting? Are we sitting? Let me look up the spread for this game. Justin Fields was announced as the starter earlier today. I believe the spread for this game is, if I'm remembering correctly, I want to say it's like 5.5 points. Let me look this up, because obviously that is going to be making a difference on what we are going to be looking at in terms of the overall game flow expectation. I'd imagine that the Raiders should be pretty heavy favorites here. Now, you do have the Raiders currently favored by 5.5 points. Okay, goddamn, I'm smart. But anyway, here, I think that in this kind of game flow, you could try to talk yourself into Josh Jacobs. Yes, Josh Jacobs was disappointing this past week against the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers were leading the majority. I mean, I think they were leading actually all of that game. So obviously, that's not the spot where you're wanting to start Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs, you like starting him whenever you're viewing him as a running back that does have multi-touchdown upside, knowing the role that he will have in the red zone. So you can talk yourself into starting Josh Jacobs here. Damien Williams as well. I mean, Damien Williams, this is a running back that's going to get targeted out of the backfield. So I think neither running back you're that excited about putting in your starting lineup. But I mean, I think a lot of teams really won't have the option but to play those guys at running back too. If you saw an injury to CMC, if you saw an injury to someone like David Montgomery, or if you had Mike Davis, or if you had Myles Gaskin, one of those disappointing running backs, then I think you could go through and start one of these guys. I would definitely be starting these players over someone like Miles Sanders. Now, our next matchup, Cleveland Browns and the Los Angeles Chargers. Start Austin Eckler. I mean, a monkey knows to start Austin Eckler here. And with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, you're starting both running backs. I mean, here, yes, with Nick Chubb, he was going in the first round, but it was a very bad pick. Doesn't matter the talent level of Nick Chubb, is a running back that is more so touchdown or bust, based on the idea that, I mean, while yes, he can go out there and run for 100 rushing yards, if he's not getting any usage in the receiving game, that equates to 10 fantasy points. Then he's a high-end running back 3 for the week with 100 rushing yards under his belt. Now, I mean, obviously, he's playing in an offense that can put up points. Obviously, he's playing in an offense that has an elite offensive line. So the rushing touchdown upside is there. Just have to get that roll away from Kareem Hunt, who's been getting those touches at the goal line. You're starting both running backs. You're more excited about Nick Chubb. We do have him higher in our rankings just because he's the better running back and seeing more touches in this offense. Now, trust me, and don't call me a Kareem Hunt hater here. I have Kareem Hunt in so many leagues, and we have Nick Chubb nowhere. I mean, we are leading the Nick Chubb is overrated bandwagon coming into the season. Now, our next matchup will be the New York Giants playing the Dallas Cowboys. So you start Saquon Barkley, don't need me to tell you that. You start Ezekiel Elliott, don't need me to tell you that. But I think here we're actually going to be benching Tony Pollard. I know Pollard has had a decent workload over the past 2 weeks. And yes, he still is a running back that I definitely want to have on our rosters for the long term, understanding that if something were to occur to Ezekiel Elliott, all of a sudden Tony Pollard, I think people can finally agree with me on this one based on the efficiency we've seen over the past 2 weeks, is someone that does have top 10 running back upside. But if this is going to be a game against the New York Giants and that Ezekiel Elliott's still clearly going to be the lead running back, I think you could see the Dallas Cowboys skew a little bit more pass happy compared to where they've been the past 2 weeks. Tony Pollard, not someone I think you should be starting in your lineup. Now, our next matchup, we got the 49ers playing the Arizona Cardinals. And here with the 49ers, if Elijah Mitchell is good to go, you cannot play Elijah Mitchell. You cannot play Trey Sermon, just because Trey Sermon did actually look pretty impressive this past week. I'm not going to lie. I know that a lot of people wanted to spin that in a negative light, but he got the volume. He got the workload that we were looking for. I don't think Elijah Mitchell comes back to this team and sees the regular 20 touches per week that he saw for like 1 week this season. No, I think that's going to be a split backfield, not starting either 49ers player. I think you could start Trey Sermon if Elijah Mitchell misses yet again. Now with the Arizona Cardinals, I know James Conner 4 touchdowns the past 2 weeks. You can't rely on that. I mean, it's a tougher matchup. I think that we are going to be benching James Conner. Start Chase Edmonds if you need a running back too. Looking at this as a situation where Chase Edmonds has such a high floor with his receiving down role. Now our next game, CLYDE Edwards-HELAIRE playing the Buffalo Bills running backs in Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. Now with CLYDE Edwards-HELAIRE, this is a running back that has been very impressive with his fantasy points output over the past few weeks. And I called him a buy low running back a couple weeks ago when everybody was off of him. But I'm not going to lie. I think that at this point, I'm less excited about CLYDE Edwards-HELAIRE going into week 5 than we were about him going into week 3, because his role in this offense has changed. I mean, Darrell Williams is now in a committee with CLYDE Edwards-HELAIRE here. So CH, you're playing him because how many points are going to be scored in this game, but you're not that excited about it. Buffalo Bills, you can play Zach Moss. I mean, Zach Moss, the lead running back, like I said, very similar to what you're seeing with CLYDE Edwards-HELAIRE. He's not as talented as CEH, but this is still going to be a game where a ridiculous amount of points are scored, and at the same time, he is the lead running back in that committee. Our last week, we got Jonathan Taylor and Latavius Murray facing off. You play Jonathan Taylor, worried about it. We are lowering him down in our expectations based on the Quentin Nelson injury, but you still have to jam him in. And with the Baltimore Ravens here, I don't want to start anybody. I'd rather see one more week of the usage that we're going to get in this backfield. And yeah, that's all I got for y'all. I really hope y'all enjoyed the video. Please make sure you go down there, drop a like on the video, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton. And yeah, when you do that, you get entered into win a Fantasy Flock Network hat. That's all I got for y'all. Have a great day.